You know, sometimes I just hate to be right. I hate to say I told you so. But I did a video a while back about how this government interference in the collection of rent and the eviction of people who don't pay rent would lead to disastrous consequences. Well, I found an example, and I thought I'd share it with you today to see how sometimes doing a good thing has really bad consequences. So we'll discuss that next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Thank you for being here. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study. We're going to do a Ponder This episode today, and I hope you enjoy these. These are a little more off the top of my head, off the cuff. I don't have a lot of preparation I'm working for, but I do have some information I think you'll find important. I hope you'll find it important enough to head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com, to share this video, to share any articles or other videos you might find there. They're all absolutely free for you to use for your own education and to share with others. And if you'd like to keep that going and you want to help the work that we're doing, you want to support that work, just click the donate button. All those donates go to keeping the Constitution Study website up and running. But today I want to talk about this idea of the government claiming the authority to prevent evictions. Now, when you rent an apartment or a house or whatever, you sign a contract, a lease that says what you will do and what the landlord will do. The landlord provides the property, they may pay for utilities, they may pay for maintenance, it's all in the lease, and what you do is you promise to be a good tenant, to take care of the place, to not destroy the place, and by the way, to pay the rent agreed to. Why is that important? Because at its core, it is a simple, contractual, voluntary interaction between two private citizens, or a private citizen and a business. So what happens when the government comes in and shuts down the economy, putting people out of work, meaning they may not be able to pay their rent? What does the government do? Does the government fix the problem? No, they look at the symptom and say, hey, this is what we'll do. We will prevent people from being evicted if they don't pay their rent. Now, I warned when this first came out that this was a recipe for disaster, that it would take a bad problem and make it even worse. Well, like I said, I told you so. I was led to an article at the New York Post that had an interesting story. Quote, "These challenges are already taking their toll in New York City, and in one case, we're seeing a twist on the usually depressing tales. One landlord and owner of a modest apartment building in Inwood neighborhood of the Big Apple is now facing eviction himself. The reason is that some of his tenants are simply refusing to pay their rent, even if they've kept their jobs or other sources of income through the pandemic." So we have the perfect example. If the renters do not pay their rent, the landlord doesn't have the money to pay for the property, or in this case, to pay for his own dwelling. David Howson, now 88, has long used rental income from his 10-unit building at 9 West 129th Street to help pay for the co-op apartment in Inwood, where he's lived for decades. Now out more than $40,000 and suffering from Alzheimer's disease, he's had trouble paying his own maintenance charges and is himself facing the boot his family claims. He lives in a condominium, and there are maintenance fees, and if they're not paid, guess what? He gets booted. Oh, but government didn't think about that when they interfered again into voluntary private arrangements. Now, you may be thinking, oh, but those poor renters, they really need a break. They lost their job. They can't pay their rent. They're going to get booted on the street. Oh, boo-hoo, it's terrible. And I agree. Anyone who's lost their job and can't pay their rent and is in that situation, that is sad. Is government the place to deal with it? So let's ask you, this is happening in the state of New York. It's in New York City. Did the government learn? You know what? If we force landlords to house people who will not pay rent, that could be bad. Do they go back and fix this? No. Again, from the article, quote, "The alleged deadbeats in Howson's building will get another break courtesy of Albany's largesse. The legislature is expected to pass a new eviction moratorium that will keep wayward tenants in their apartments until at least May of 2021. So again, Albany, which is the capital of the state of New York, decides, nope, we are going to provide additional largesse. We're going to put Mr. Housen in even worse financial situations. How? By preventing him from getting tenants that will actually pay their rent. So now he's got a building that he has to pay taxes on, he has to pay maintenance on, and he cannot get rent from his tenants. So now the legislature in Albany, the capital of the state of New York, decides rather than looking and realizing they've caused a problem, they're doubling down. They're going to say that these tenants aren't required to pay rent at least until May of 2021. They're not only interfering with commerce, they're interfering with private contracts, a violation of the U.S. Constitution. They are intentionally picking winners and losers. They are basically saying, listen, if you're a renter, you get a free pass. If you're a landlord, tough. Now, I feel for those who have lost their jobs, but it's not Mr. Housen's fault. It's the government's fault. It's Albany's fault. It's the legislature and the governor in Albany that are the reason you are out of a job. Why are they punishing Mr. Housen? Quote, we have nothing. We are completely destitute, daughter Jessica Housen, who manages her father's affair, told the Post. That's right. The legislature, the government in Albany is destroying many people's lives. Mr. Housen's just a single example, because they're too stupid to realize that they caused the problem and they're just going to keep making it worse. You see, the majority of the debt owed to Mr. Housen is being attributed to one apartment in the 10-unit building he maintains. The tenant in that apartment isn't someone who lost their job due to the pandemic and could no longer afford the $926 monthly rent. She's a woman who inherited the rent-controlled apartment from her husband in 2016 and has never paid the rent since the day she took possession. That debt has now stacked up into tens of thousands of dollars. Social Services has paid Housen a piddling $215 a month on her behalf, but he can't afford to soak up that much loss indefinitely. Do you see what's going on here? First, you have the state or the city telling the owner of the building what he can charge for rent. He can charge $926. Now, we have no idea what the apartment is actually worth because it's rent controlled. When this woman's husband died, she was allowed to inherit this rent control. Okay, doesn't make it any better, but it certainly isn't really making it worse. But here, she has an apartment she's been in for at least 4 years without paying any rent. And now he is not allowed to remove her. Now, I think this man has been very generous. He has been renting an apartment that he can rent for $926 a month, receiving only $215 a month from Social Services, and he hasn't booted her out. But he's just one man. How many landlords are losing everything because the government has said you cannot enforce your contract? Right? Eviction moratoria are a refusal. They are a prohibition on enforcing contract. It is a violation of the law. It's a violation of the Constitution of the state. It's a violation of the United States Constitution. In fact, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution reads, quote, no state shall pass any bill of attainder ex post facto law or law impairing the obligation of contracts. The states are not allowed to interfere with contracts. They cannot pass a law to interfere or impair the obligation of a contract, which is what the paying of rent is. That lease is a contract. There's a contract between the landlord and the renter, and the state of New York and many other states, and even the federal government are interfering. Now, while the U.S. Constitution doesn't specifically prohibit the United States from doing that, it's prohibited under the 10th Amendment because they don't have the authority to interfere with private contracts. But states are specifically prohibited in the Constitution from impairing the obligation of contracts, which is exactly what they are doing. What good is law if we're not going to pay any attention to it? Why are the people of New York allowing Albany to steal these properties from these landlords? They're not stealing them for their own use. They're simply depriving them of it. They are depriving them of their property without due process of law because they're telling them that they cannot enforce the contract they have legally entered into. This is an abomination. This is awful. This is that little bitty tyranny that a lot of people just glance over, but is at the root of the problems we have in America. We have states telling their private citizens, citizens that the state governments work for, that they cannot enforce their legally enacted contracts. If they can do that for a rental property, if they can do that for a job contract, what prevents them from doing that for anything else? Oh, you have a contract to buy a home. Well, the government doesn't think you should own that home, so we're going to infringe on that obligation. We're going to impair that obligation. Oh, you have a contract to buy a car? Oh, sorry, we don't think you shouldn't have that car. You don't have enough people in your family to get that car. We're going to impair the obligation to have that car delivered to you. You think that's crazy? How long ago? Was it just a year ago that we thought, you know what? The government would never tell people you don't have to pay your rent, that you can't go to work, that you must wear a mask, that you can't go to a church service, that this business can be open, but that business can't be open. Learn from our history. They've already done it in areas that we never thought they would do. Why do we think they won't do it again? This is terrible. This is the destruction not only of the republic, of society. If I enter into a contract with you and I cannot be sure that I can actually fulfill that contract, we can't do business. We can't trust one another. This is not simply dealing with the landlord and renters in New York City. This is the very fabric of commerce in our country, is the trust of contracts. And if government is allowed to disable that, where can you go for what you need? Oh, I know. Government. This act by the legislature in Albany is the enslavement of the people of New York. In any other state where this is happening, it's the enslavement of the people of New York. And when this was done at the federal level, it's the enslavement of the American people. And it seems the vast majority of us are more than willing to be sold into slavery because we've been promised just a little bit of temporary safety. We'll protect you. We'll protect you from that big bad coronavirus. We'll protect you from your landlord. We'll protect you from that big bad business. All you have to do is sell us your freedom, your rights, and your liberty. And the American people are doing it. Hopefully, you're not one of them. Hopefully, you're willing to stand. Hopefully, you're willing to look at what can I do. Now, would you like to join with others who are also interested in the Constitution, rights, and liberty? Then do me a favor, head over to Constitution Scholars, with an S, scholars, plural, constitutionscholars.com. That is the community we're building to actually have people read and study the Constitution for themselves, to help each other, where you can meet other people who are reading and studying. Maybe they're in your own state, maybe they're across the country. You can find people to discuss and debate and learn with and study. And best of all, it's free. Go there, register for your free account, find neighbors, find people to engage with, use the library, take a class. All of that's there. There are other features that cost money, but you can remain on the Constitution Scholars for free. It's not a trial. Because I think if we don't get together, if we don't realize there are other people that are thinking the same way we are, that are as interested in the Constitution as we are, if we don't find them and start getting together and working together, then the Republic truly is doomed. And the sacred fire of liberty that George Washington talked about is extinguished. And if there's one thing that 2020 and the beginning of 2021 have shown us, that's not hyperbole. That's not something that could never happen. We are watching it happen to us today. And not only will we suffer for it, but our children and our children's children will suffer for it. So again, head over to Constitution Scholars, check it out. Hey, if you don't like it, delete your account. It doesn't cost you anything, but I think you'll find people and resources that will help you. And I hope you found this video useful enough that you'll come back next time for the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to